Okay, so where we currently are, so a quick update on our reasons for returning and how we were allowed to return. So all the information you're going to see in this presentation, all the information that we use is based on what we get from the CDC, US Soccer, and NorCal Premier. NorCal Premier have been putting on a lot of town hall meetings for us as directors where we've been able to share our ideas and thoughts and how we found solutions to the situation we find ourselves in, and also been providing us with guidance on how to open up and return. All that does then come from US Club Soccer and CDC, and also the City of Fremont then have their own levels at which they want us to be returning to. So we also have to meet their guidelines when we set up our return into practice. So everything that you see in this presentation, it is based on whatever information received from science and data. We're not being persuaded by any form of politics, anything we see on social media, and also not from any form of pressure from outside sources, such as other sports or maybe other soccer organizations. Every area is operating slightly differently, depending on what the local cities have as expectations for the return. And some have been more strict than others. And I appreciate all the effort the City of Fremont have put in to trying to keep us all safe and getting us back on the fields at the same time. We're also very lucky that at the board level, we do have people who have a relationship with scientists in the field of immunology and molecular genetology, which is very specific to what we find ourselves in with COVID right now. So we've been able to reach out for a little bit more expertise as well. Whenever something has come up or when we've had a question about how we can return safely and whether or not our policy for returning they feel is also safe for the current situation. So we've had a lot of expertise in being able to put all this together. So throughout this presentation, we're going to be providing you with information on the expectations we have of our coaches, you guys, the parents, and also the players. So hopefully the players are also on this call so they can see the information firsthand. It will include the guidance on arriving and leaving practice, how the practices will be structured, and then also the procedures we'll be going through pre and post practice as a bit of a summary to everything that we have been through. So I think it's important that before we start, we do understand that we have expectations that it's not going to be exactly the same as when we last practiced back on, I believe it was March the 16th. It will look different to begin with. We are still able to practice and be able to meet the demands of the individual player elements and also the concepts of our style of play. I'm currently finishing up the writing of the curriculum for the short-term period, which we hope to be in with reduced practices. But again, it is important that we don't have expectations of jam-packed fields with people running around making challenges and being involved in scrimmages. It is going to be with its own restrictions. And what we'll also do towards the end of this presentation is show you the younger curriculum, as that one has already been complete. The older one is just a couple more hours away from completion. So first of all, we'll start with the coaches. They will not be sharing any equipment. That means cones. There'll be no one using pennies. The goals, if we decide to use them, we will not be moving them between groups. Every coach needs to get their own piece of equipment, bring it to the field, and it stays with them. If a coach forgets the cones, then hard luck to that coach. They're not going to be able to borrow off other people. So your training groups are going to be little training pods where we keep within those small groups. We'll be sanitizing the cones between every session. We'll also, if we do use the goals, be sanitizing the goals between every session with a spray, which you have, disinfectant spray. We'll also then, when players arrive, be first taking a temperature, sanitizing the player's ball by spraying it with disinfectant. We'll also then provide hand sanitizer to any player that does not bring their own. We do ask that players, if they can, bring their own travel sanitizer and have it with them in their bag. It's going to greatly help us. We have a lot in stock right now, but as I'm sure you're aware of, trying to get sanitizer in bulk isn't the easiest at times. But we do have plenty to begin with. But if players are able to help us out with bringing their own, that would be great and a huge support to us. We also understand that the information is changing almost daily. Today, I believe they released guidelines that they want people aged 12 years and up to wear masks in the same conditions as they want adults to be wearing masks. That was something I read just a little bit earlier before coming on this call. And we're also aware of how taking the player's temperature hasn't been as effective as they initially thought it would be. Considering the climate in which we're in, where it is over 100 degrees for the past 5 days, we are going to get inaccurate temperature readings if a child has just run onto the field or has been running around just before getting the field or sat in a warm car. So we are aware of that. And when we do the temperature reading throughout the first few weeks, if we find that we are getting a lot of outlier recordings with multiple players getting either excessively high temperatures when with us at the field and maybe not when they did their initial health check, then that is something we'll look at maybe adjusting. We have been speaking with other clubs, and a number of clubs have already stopped taking temperature because they don't feel it's always been past the guideline. It's not the most efficient way of doing a check. But we'll keep monitoring that with us, and we'll see how that goes. Parents, you're going to be a huge part of us returning to practice. We're going to be relying on your support and help to make sure that we keep this safe environment. So we'll be asking that you complete the health check before every practice. When you register for TeamSnap, so those of you who are already registered, if you were to go onto your phone right now and you are to open your TeamSnap app, and this is only available to those who are already registered at this point, you will see that there is a meeting set for today on every team. So I've just pulled up the 06 Boys Black Elite. I'm able to now click on today's schedule, the 7 to 8 p.m. meeting in which we're having right now. And that enables me to, one, put in my health details. So as you'll notice, just below where it says the time and whether or not you are attending, there is an option there to complete your health check. By pressing on that button and pressing start, it'll ask you the questions based on the health check. And then what I'll get as the coach, and only I'm able to see, is how many people have completed that and who hasn't completed. If a player does not complete that health check, they will not be allowed to participate within the practice. Okay, so it's important that, one, as parents, we help remind the players to do it, but I also suggest trying to get the players into a good habit of trying to go into it and do it themselves well, but obviously with your support of having it through the TeamSnap application on your phone. It can also be done on the desktop or the laptop if you work through the desktop function. It is also available there. Please be on time dropping off players. We will be reducing practice down to 40 minutes. Therefore, we want to be as efficient as possible with getting players started as close to the start time as possible. So that allows us to get the full 40 minutes. And also when picking up players well at the allocated exit points. We're going to go through the whole process of arriving and leaving. But as I just mentioned, with the sessions being adjusted to a shorter duration, that is going to involve the check-in time. So if we have players arriving on time and we see more people arriving, that delays the very start of the practice. Then it means we're going to be having less time of being physically active within the session itself. At the exit point, we also want to make sure we reduce social gatherings. We want to make sure they're able to maintain your social distancing. If you can, please stay in your cars and ask the players if you feel they're old enough, responsible enough to come and find you within the car. Or if you do come out of the car, the parking area next to the, I believe it's the Adventure Park, does have a lot of open spaces, so you will be able to come out of the car and maintain that social distancing by the exit. But again, we are relying on the parents for your cooperation at that time to support us with that. When dropping off players, we do ask that you remain in the car. One is going to reduce the amount of spread, also social distancing. It's going to prevent congregation of players. If your child is in the U8 training pool or is a U9 player, so the very younger players who are aged between 6 and 8 years old, we understand it's maybe the first time in which they've come to practice. They don't know who the staff are. It's a new facilities they're not aware of. So we completely understand that flexibility with you from coming out of the car and maybe take them to where they need to be stood to line up ready to come into practice. But please, as soon as we allow them into the field, then our staff will be able to support where they need to go. And then we ask that you go back then into your car. Parents as well at all times will need to wear the mask when outside of the car during the drop-off and pickup. But again, we are asking that you remain in the car as much as possible. Again, please be diligent with maintaining social distancing around pickup and drop-off. And at this time, please do not approach any coaches while we're still within these stricter policies and procedures. For those of you who are returning to the program, I like to think we are usually approachable as a coaching staff. We're more than happy to speak to you. But obviously, during this time when we're trying to reduce the amount of connections between people and stick to our training pods, we do ask that you refrain from poaching coaches and please use email to communicate with the coaches. Okay, moving on to the players. Masks for players will be mandatory upon arriving and leaving the facility, so every player will need to wear a mask. Once the player comes into us and we do the check-in of taking temperature, providing hand sanitizer, checking they've done their pre-screening, and also spraying of the soccer ball, at that point they'll then be able to take off their mask and put it into the bag. We're asking that all players bring a bag with them. That way they can keep all their belongings together in one location, so we don't have players picking up the wrong equipment of someone else, and that they know exactly where all their items are. So it's important that every player must bring a ball with them. That should be for every single practice, even when there is no COVID restrictions, but especially now, as while we will be able to do activities where there's passing and shooting involved, the majority of the program is going to be based on one player, one ball. So if we are going to be running those sessions, it is going to be incredibly difficult for someone without a ball to be able to participate in. And with maintaining social distancing, it will not be possible to share a ball during, for example, a dribbling session. So we do ask that every player brings their own ball with them. Other items to remember to bring of their own is their water ball. They will definitely need to have their own water ball, no sharing of water, and sunscreen. And again, if they can provide their own hand sanitizer, that would be great. It's important that all players follow the instructions and the guidelines. This is what's going to enable us to return safely. And with that, that includes the entering and leaving of the fields. And this is why we need your help as much as possible with the parents to guide the players through those different rules in which we have. And again, please bring a bag with them. When they come in, they'll have their own coat in their own area. They can leave the bag there, and that will enable players then to someone to put their face mask, but also then to keep all their belongings in one safe area. Okay, so this is how the playing area is going to be looking. So this is an aerial view of Central Park. So to begin with, this is the area where you'll be entering and exiting the fields. So the main parking area where the grass fields are on the tennis courts, that is where we'll be asking you to drop off the players. Where you see the green dotted line at the bottom, we'll be setting up a walkway into the facilities, and we'll also be having signs there to remind people of the different guidelines and also where they'll be entering the fields. Our training pods, you can see here, numbered 1 to 6 in the blue squares. When the player comes in, they'll come to the square with the coaches, they'll do the check-in, and then they'll go to their playing area, which is just the side. So as you can see, we'll be cutting off all the different players into 6 different playing areas and check-in areas. At the very end of the session, we will then be having up in this area, the red dots. This is where players will be leaving. At the very top here, this is the car park next to Adventureland, where we'll be asking you to pick up your child. My mistake with the arrow down the bottom, it's not a right turn only. You can come straight across the light or turn left from the mission area. Down at the very bottom, we have our own COVID resource page on our website. So this will go through a little bit more information for you also, if you're looking for any references to return in. So an overhead view to hopefully help with navigating where we are. Here is the entrance, number 1. 2, 3, and 4 is the entrance to the actual field itself. So we're asking for people to be parking in this area here. We'll be doing our best to keep this area open, free of cars. That way, when players do come in, there's more spaces for them to come down into where we'll be lining up to come in. 5 is where players will be checking in their own individual pods. And 6 is then the exit gate where people will come out. And this is the parking area over here for the activity center or the play area, which is currently closed. So all this area will be available for social distancing for players to come out, find the parent, and then go to their car. Oops. There we go. So here's a bit of a visual for you as well as if you are arriving at the field in real time, and we'll go through these each individually. But as you can see, it's the entrance, the lining up to come into the field, where then you'll be doing your check-in and where you'll be exiting. So we go through one each individually. Again, main car park, so hopefully you're familiar with this. The turf fields are the lit fields on the right-hand side, next to Stevenson Boulevard, across the road from the tennis courts. And that is where we'll be asking you to park. And again, staying in your car. And if the very younger players, when you do leave your car, putting your face mask on to try and help guide them towards the fields. What you'll find here along this path, which you're familiar with entering, we'll be having socially distanced cones out. So when players will be coming in, they'll be asked to stay at one of these cones, going down into the playing area and down into this area just here, just next to where the playing field is. Players will be asked to stay by one of those cones. This is where we'll be also reminding every player that they need to have their mask on. Down in this area, we'll be having another sign which we'll cover next. And so while the players are waiting here on this side and both this side of the entrance to the field, we will still be having sessions going on the playing fields themselves. You'll also find this session reminds you of the new restrictions, and it's this area right in front of the field in which we will be doing our best to keep open. Obviously, if there's people there before the staff when we arrive at 4 p.m., it's going to be difficult to empty those bays. Maybe Gav can deadlift and roll a car out the way, but more than likely we'll have to wait until they move and then keep that area open and free for us. But again, this is where the first part of entering the field will take place. As players are lining up, they will notice this sign at the very bottom right here, just before you get onto the playing fields. Whoever is coaching in this bottom corner on field 3, they will come over, they will remove the sign, and players then will go through to their check-in area. We'll be asking players to make sure they maintain the distance, using the cones on the ground to be able to gauge the distance between each and every individual as they move over to their check-in area. These check-in areas, there'll be 6 of them, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. We're reducing it to 10 players per session for now, while the guidelines restrict us to a smaller number, and each player will have their own individual cone. Whoever gets the first picks the cones and they fill up the cones as they arrive. That is where players will be leaving their bags, and that is where we'll be doing the temperature check, checking that they've completed the online health checker on TeamSnap, spraying their ball with disinfectant, and also providing hand sanitizer if needed. It is there where players will then go take water breaks throughout the session. So again, they'll be socially distanced during the water breaks. If you are late and everyone is on the field, you will find this sign has been put back. You'll have to wait until the coach on field 3 comes over, lets you through, and directs you to where your check-in is. It's important that if players are late, they don't just run through and run over to the area. We want to make sure players are showing up for the correct session, that they've done all the pre-check, and they've also had all the equipment sprayed which is needed. So we do ask that everyone follows these rules and wait until the level. At the end of the session, we'll then be directing everyone up through the middle to go out through the top gate. I've asked the city, but to no response as of yet, to confirm this will be the gate which will be open at the very top. There are 2 gates. There's this one and there's the one on the corner. So whichever one is open is the one they'll be exiting out of. We have specifically requested this gate because it allows for greater area over here for parents to be waiting and to be able to maintain the social distancing if you need to leave the car to come and pick your child up. There is to be no entering through here. It is going to be a one-way system of into the practice location and then back out onto the other side. And again, we ask parents that when you are picking up your child, if you do leave the car, that you put your mask on. And also a reminder to all players, you will need to have your face mask on when leaving the field. And then it's up to you if you want to take that face mask off once you are back in the car. So, practice conditions. like I mentioned at the very beginning, it's going to be a lot different to what we are used to. As you're aware through other everyday activities right now, going to the supermarket isn't exactly the same as what it used to be. A lot of things have changed. It's going to be the same for our practices to begin with as well. So within the regulations, if you look in the bottom right, we also take into consideration the different risk factors. Lowest risk is continuing Zoom sessions. We are obviously limited by keeping everything on Zoom. Sports weren't designed to be online unless you play FIFA or Fortnite. But to be able to coach, it is not ideal, but we are still able to provide players with the individual player element developments and the physical developments, which we do on Thursday. It is slightly more risky if you go back with team competition. And obviously it is of a high risk if we return to full competition playing against other teams. Where we find ourselves right now is in this middle ground in between the lower risk and the medium risk. We've found ourselves in this situation by returning to only 2 on-field sessions. So it's reduced to what we used to have. And also the timing of the sessions is reduced down to 40 minutes. And also the groups are reduced down to 10 players, or a maximum of 10 players. We'll be doing blended learning where we'll be able to still work on the group conditioning with a Saturday morning Zoom call where we'll be continuing the club session, which we've been doing on Thursdays, but I will be moving to a Saturday. So in total, we will be able to have 3 sessions for every player. Again, there's no more than 10 participants per group, and all of our activities are either individual or small group activities. Even within those small group activities, we have been able to create almost what would be a small-sided games situation through different marking of the fields where we're able to play zonally, and we'll be able to cover that within our curriculum very shortly. And I also think at the end of today's meeting, Max Allen is going to give us a rendition of his favorite song. He looks like he's getting set up for his one-man gig. I can see you, Max. Everything will be non-contact and all opponents will be passive. Defending will be based on distances, trying to block the passing lines. Again, participants will be able to maintain social distancing throughout the rest periods and within the practices. Time between sessions, we have 5 minutes between groups coming in and coming out. It allows us for cleaning of the cones, but also to make sure the area has been cleared. There's to be no sharing of any water or hand sanitizer. And we're also asking players, and this is usually with the older players, that they make sure they have the boots on when they're in the car, shin pads in when they're in the car, and they don't take any of those items off until they're back in the car at the very end of the session. Shin pads at this time obviously isn't as important as normal because there is no contact within the practices. So if players don't want to wear the shin pads, that is not a problem, but they cannot take the shin pad out during the actual practice session. And again, 1 entrance and 1 exit to the playing facilities. As you're aware of, those of you returning as well, and those of you who've read the parent meeting from before, we have an open training policy. And what that open training policy allows for is if a player misses a practice, they can make it up with another team. If we feel a player is going through a rate of development, we invite them to practice with another team. And also if a player just wants to get more practice, then they're allowed to practice with another team also. Unfortunately, during this time, we have to suspend open training because we are keeping the pods isolated to small groups of 10. That even means within the team. So if you're in Group A, a player will not be able to make up a session with Group B. We're keeping everything isolated down to groups of 10 individuals. That allows us then, if there is to be a case of COVID, that we're able to track and trace, and we're able to isolate which groups then need to go into quarantine for 14 days. We have asked the city, and we're waiting a response for this as well, how they would like us to operate that. That if a player comes within contact of someone with COVID within 14 days, that they let us know and that they do not attend any practices. If they have attended a practice and then found out they're with someone who contracted COVID within 14 days, then we will need to isolate and go into Zoom calls for all the sessions of that one coach who covers that group. So for example, if it's me and it's an 06 individual that comes into contact, then the senior players would also then need to go onto Zoom. Obviously, if that happens, we'll not be telling anyone what team it was or who the individual was. We'll just be letting the groups know that they'll need to go into quarantine. And we'll also let the club know that there was a case and that a group has gone into quarantine for 14 days because someone has come into contact. Because we understand that if you are more sensitive to the situation, you may not feel comfortable knowing that someone within the environment itself has come into contact with COVID. So we do understand and appreciate everyone's sensitivity to the situation right now is different. So we are going to do our best to be able to cater for every individual the best that we can. So pre-practice procedures, just to kind of go over what we went through. You must complete the TeamSnap health check the day of training. It only opens up on the day of training. So please make sure you complete that. If it's not completed, a player will not be able to participate. They can go back to the entrance and then contact the parent to fill it out if they need to, but they cannot start practicing with us until that has been completed. If you're feeling ill, any symptoms of COVID, or again, if you've been around anyone within 14 days who's been diagnosed with COVID, please stay at home. If we can keep everyone within these guidelines, we should be able to continue through this without any issues. Obviously, there's a lot of different areas which are out of our control, and we understand that. There have been a few clubs who have had to go into quarantine for a number of days. It's understandable. It is throughout the country. But if we can do our best to make sure we're all vigilant of what we're doing, we should be able to go through this without any issues. Please make sure all your items are placed in your bag. They're not just left around on the ground. You put them into your bag. Training uniforms should be worn to every single practice. Again, that's another one which should be done outside of COVID. But I'm hoping one plus side of COVID is we get into better habits, more positive habits with certain things. And training uniform needs to be worn to practice, but also your shin pads and cleats. And all this needs to be on before practice. Again, this is mostly the seniors which show up in their jeans and their fashion t-shirt because they're really cool. And then they get changed at the field. The younger ones, not so bad. And again, masks must be worn on entry to every practice and when leaving the field. And that mask must be kept on until we complete the check-in procedure. Post-practice, no congregating around the areas of the field and outside. Please keep your distances. And again, mask needs to be put on immediately following the end of the practice session. So, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, quite often we are very flexible, sometimes maybe too flexible or soft on some of the rules, especially when it comes to the wearing of the right uniform. But when it comes to the different COVID policies and procedures, we are going to have to be exceptionally strict. We're going to have less flexibility. We want to make sure this is a safe environment for everyone so that we all stay healthy. Not only is the players' health of paramount importance, but it's also the parents, your extended families, and also the coaches' families at the same time. So we have to make sure we consider everyone's health when we follow these guidelines. And by operating together as a club and working together, we should be able to make sure this is a safe environment for everyone. So a few of the strict rules which we are not going to be wavering from. Again, you can only participate in the session you'll be assigned to. Coaches are going through their lists of registered players and they are separating the teams into smaller groups because there'll be a group A and a group B practicing at 2 different times. Within the normal session time, but split into 2. Any parent refusing to cooperate and operate within these rules will be asked to leave the program, and obviously along with their child as well, until the guidelines have been relaxed a little bit. We understand masks, for some strange reason, do seem to tear people apart right now, and who needs to wear one and who shouldn't wear one. Our policy on this is every parent who leaves the car needs to be wearing a mask. Every player arriving at the field and leaving needs to wear a mask. If you feel you prefer to wear a mask during practice, that is completely up to the individual player, but it is not something which we are saying is a must. Players are welcome to take off their mask during the activities because we'll be keeping them socially distanced. And again, we understand people have different opinions and sensitivities. So if you don't believe in what we're doing, you don't want to stay within the rules, all we do is we politely ask you to refrain from registering until the rules have been relaxed to where you're more comfortable attending. But that also goes to the flip side as well. If you are hesitant to start yet, you still feel it's not quite safe enough yet, we completely understand and sympathize with that. Again, your roster spot is going to be kept available to you until you're comfortable returning. That is something we have said from the beginning we'll make sure to do, is keep every player's spot available to them. This is something we never thought we'd have to deal with. It's completely unique and hopefully a one-time event in which we'll have to deal with, okay? But we are sensitive to the situation. Again, open training is postponed at this time, so you'll not be able to make up. Unfortunately as well, I know this is popular with a lot of players. Players do like to show up early, get a little bit of extra practice, some juggling, some shooting. Quite a lot of players like to stay behind and practice as well. At this time, we're not going to allow players to do that. We can't prevent you from going onto the outside fields. There's a lot of space on the outside field, so you're more than welcome to go and do your own individual training as long as you're keeping your distances on those fields if they're open. But within the fenced area, unfortunately, we can't have people showing up early to get a bit of extra individual practice. As much as we support that any other time, unfortunately, we're going to have to put a suspension on that at this moment in time. And again, parents, we're asking that you be on time, if not early, to practice. Early would be better for dropping off and also for picking up at the designated areas. This does bring us to the end of the presentation. So we're going to quickly jump over into the curriculum so you get an idea of what we're going to be doing as well. So you can see the distances being kept and how we're able to still continue to coach within our game model. But just to finish up on this part of the presentation, we greatly appreciate the cooperation. We understand this is difficult for everyone. We're all finding different challenges as we go through this. So we do appreciate everyone's support and commitment to this and making sure we can try and get players back on the field in a safe environment and where we're able to look after the welfare of everyone involved, both the players, extended families, and all of the coaching staff. So I'm now going to stop sharing this and move over to the curriculum. And then what we'll be doing after this, we will then have Eric ask questions. So again, if you came in a little bit later, if you want to use the chat function to leave question, Eric will be asking me those questions as we come to the end of the presentation. So we've been going through our curriculums through all the different age groups, and we have modified these to be socially distanced. We've also shared with this NorCal Premier to hopefully help us support other clubs around the area as well. You received all this at the start of the season, so we'll skip through all this. So we have had to change everything. We won't go through each and every individual session. That would take quite a long time. But what we will do is just be able to show you that we're still able to touch on all the different areas in the practice session. We can still work on the player elements. So those key items which the individual player, we hope, optimizes as they go through the different age groups. Our objectives, the sessions, we're still able to work towards those. The psychological and physiological pillars are also still able to be developed through the way we conduct our practice sessions, and we're still able to get our coaching points. Unfortunately, the one pillar which is going to be more challenged than before is that social pillar. But I think even just being on the same field and seeing your friends again is still going to go some way to help support in that social pillar. Right now, I think Team Snap would be a great kind of tool to keep social interactions with your teammates. Speaking purely just based on the seniors, I know that when we get to the senior age groups, we have the team captain because they're older, sets up a WhatsApp group or Snapchat or whatever app kids now use, and they have all the team on there and they're able to talk to each other and no one's left out. Also, younger players who don't have access to that, and obviously probably rightly so, being certain ages, is a bit different, but Team Snap does have a chat function. It's where they can still be able to speak to each other. And again, Zoom has been a huge resource for us during these times. So as you can see within the practice session, the setup, which we go through the diagrams on the right, all players are able to be kept within safe distances away from each other. 6 feet, 2 yards is the distance we're meant to be maintaining for social distancing. For visual, just imagine you push over Butch. He's our tallest coach, 6'2", I think he is. And as long as you're one butch away from each other, you're going to be keeping your social distancing. All right. So if you need a visual, use Butch. I still use Peter Schmeichel. I've always measured height by how many Peter Schmeichels someone is or a building is. So if it's a big building, it's usually 6 Peter Schmeichels. All right, moving on. Again, for every single session we have this is our session plan. We're able to also do different kinds of passing patterns by having socially distanced cones in the middle. It means players are able to keep that distance. If we have a continuous activity, and by that, it's not quite a line drill, but you have action within the main playing area and players stepping in, so you have your short rest period between repetitions. These will be socially distanced with the cones, like the check-in. So as soon as the cone in front becomes clear, the next player walks up. And this is where we're asking players to be on this presentation tonight, so they're aware of all these rules. We will keep reiterating it to players, but I'm sure it's going to take maybe 1 or 2 sessions for them to get used to these new rules. But we do have everything in place to support them. We can still apply pressure to players just by having a player who comes down in a running motion towards a cone. That is going to be able to simulate where a defender would be coming from. So they have a visual aid to be able to turn and make an adjustment. So they're still able to see the correct cues on the field to when they would perform a skill. So we're still able to recreate those different sessions within the social boundaries. Again, competitions, we're able to do races by mirroring each other. So we're still able to add competition with every practice we're doing. Movement and agility, we can still do that with the sharing of balls and also decision making. So in this activity, there are multiple balls being used where players have to lift their head up, look around and be able to see the free player. So even when socially distanced, we're able to put different restrictions on the player and pressures on the player. So they have to have quick decision making to be able to look at the different options they have. So we're still able to make this an implicit learning environment where they're not just being commanded and told what to do. We're even able to still work within scrimmages, but our scrimmages are socially distanced. So as you can see within this defending session, we're looking at the pressure of the first defender in part 1. Part 2, we're looking at defending as a unit. From here, you'll notice there are boundaries between the units, so players can't get within 6 feet of each other. They're also in their own divided lateral channels as well, so players can't cross over into each other's channels. And from here, we're still able to teach players to cut off passing options and to drop into mutual spaces to prevent passes being played through the seams into target players. So we're still able to work on those different concepts within the game model and then the individual player elements as well. The curriculum is also being designed for the older players. Hopefully I'm going to be able to finish within the next few hours. So that brings us to the end of the actual presentation. So it's going to give us about 15 minutes to go through your questions. You got plenty of time to submit those questions. If you go through the chat function, you'll be able to leave the question. And we have Eric, who is going to be asking those questions for us now. Again, this has been recorded, so we'll be able to put this on the website, along with the questions from last night and the answers, and any different questions that we get from tonight. So, Eric, just going to give you a few seconds notice. I'm unmuting you, so you can turn off your heavy metal and concentrate on the presentation.
Hello, Di. Hi, everyone.
You're there.
I'm unmuted. Alrighty. First question, will all the different groups practice in the same field?
Yeah, we'll be at Central Park. So Central Park is the facilities we'll be using. We're not returning to ICP and probably won't until we're able to practice as a club, where you practice with the whole team and social distancing is no longer a requirement. So we will all be at Central Park, but what we will be doing, and I can go back to that slide for you. What we will be doing is dividing the field up to where all the, wrong document. Bear with me when I get the right document. Hopefully everyone can see this. We will be dividing the field up to where we will be in separate training areas. And what we'll also be doing is if, for example, and actually I think it is Travis, is the coach at area 3, he will only practice in that area throughout the night. So he won't move over to any different areas. you'll only be in this area. We've been able to work the curriculum where I believe you all still practice at the same times. Obviously, some were slightly different where you have one session where it didn't used to be. So if, for example, Butch has been on field 6 for the first 2 sessions, then I arrive, I just take the space of where Butch was, he leaves, and I then clean this area before the players then show up for their practice. Then every coach, while players are here ready to come in, will already have had all these different training pods cleaned before players arrive, so we can as quickly and as efficiently get them into the check-in areas without crossing over.
Okay. Will you be sending that map to everyone?
Yeah, all this is going to be put online. We'll also send out the map individually. And also we will be sending you the updated schedule along with the breakdowns of group A's and B's. That stuff is ready to go and we'll post that. I'm going to try and get that done tonight, but if not, first thing in the morning. And the coaches will work on separating the groups over the weekend as registrations come through. We'll be splitting them into equal groups, no more than 10 players per group.
Okay. Will the kids be instructed to exit the field one by one to minimize crowd?
What we're going to be doing is almost like a system where you're on the plane. When you get off the plane, the first rows go through. So we're going to be asking groups 1 and 4 to go out the gate first. The next 2 groups are behind watching. We are going to have cones set up along the fence. So if a player's parent isn't there, they stand by the cone until they see the parent. And we'll be reminding them of keeping that distancing, but by having them going out individually, we should be able to maintain our social distancing as they leave the fence. So yeah,
Okay.
exiting will be controlled.
All right. For teams that have more than 10 players, how's that being handled if the pods are being matched to 10 kids?
So no one has a roster greater than 20. I think it's only the senior boys who have a roster of dead on 20 players. So we're able to split that up into 2. So we'll be dividing those into 2 groups of 10.
Okay. Will there be any goalkeeping practice?
No, at this point, we will not be returning to goal practice just yet. Issue being, Butch is also a team coach. So if we have players from every team going to Butch, that then means if Butch's group has someone come into contact with COVID, we have to shut the entire program down, as it's increased the amount of contacts we have between everyone, and also vice versa. If there's a player from my team that's come into contact and goes to Butch, that means, again, the entire club would have to close down. So at this time, we're not going to return to goalkeeper practice until a little bit later in the reopening.
Okay. By when will players know which group they'll be in? Because there's some players that see 2 on-field sessions per day on the team snap. So which one will they know to go to?
So the coaches are currently updating all the information on TeamSnap, and what they're also doing is they're updating those groups as registrations come through. So we can't really finalize these groups until we know the number of players that are registered. So we're hoping, people are able to complete their registrations who haven't done so yet before the end of Saturday, because we do want to get this information out to you as soon as possible. But your practice session will be within the time frame which you see. I'll put up quickly what the schedule actually looks like, so you can get an idea of, here we go, of what it looks like. And again, this will be sent out to everyone as well. So as you can see, we have all the coaches assigned to one of those check-in areas, and they'll be in that check-in area for the duration of the practice. I believe everyone still has the same practice time. I think it is only the 06 Boys Elite which have a slightly earlier time on a Thursday instead of the later time, but it's not by much difference, because they'll be starting similar to when it was with the small Sunday games previously. Look over to the left. First, Group A will be from 6 p.m. to 6:40 p.m. Group B, 6:45 to 7:25. So again, using the 06 as an example, They have, I believe, 18 players on the roster. If all 18 players were to register, we'll divide those into groups 10 and 8. Group A's 10 players will come in, practice for 40 minutes. They will then leave. 5 minutes later, Group B start, and then they will be leaving. And then 5 minutes later, the next round of teams come through onto the facilities to go through their training sessions. While we're talking about the groups as well, we're more than happy for you to send in requests. If you have friends on the team which you're more familiar with, you want to practice with those friends, obviously please let us know. We'll do our best to try and accommodate that. Once we've started, we won't be changing groups. You'll be in those groups. Carpooling, we understand with the Bay Area being what it is, with late finish times at work, traffic in the area. If you need to carpool, please can you carpool with players who are in your group and not with other teams practicing at the same time in different pods, because again, that could be a factor in closing down more than just one coach's training sessions. Obviously, if you have a brother or a sister, you're going to have to be in the same car, so you will have to carpool, unless you're not a big fan of each other. We'll let you guys deal with that one. But with carpooling, please keep it to your training pods. So if you are within the same training pod, again, please communicate with each other to finalize your carpooling. Next, Eric.
Okay. Yeah, all right. You mentioned that players can take off the mask after sanitation, but can they wear it if desired?
Yeah, players can wear them if they prefer to. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Well, again, once they're on the field, they're going to be socially distanced. Even if a player runs over to quickly grab a ball, they're not going to be next to anyone for more than a split second just by brushing past someone. So, yeah, they're more than welcome to take off the mask as soon as the activities have then started. But all the practice sessions have been socially distanced, so they should be fine.
Okay. Do we need to wear gloves?
Again, if you would like to wear gloves, you're more than welcome to wear gloves. If anyone feels they would like to take more kind of PPE precaution, they're more than welcome to. We're not going to tell anyone to take the gloves off. And it's same as with the mask. If they want to keep the mask on, they're, again, more than welcome to.
Okay. Got 4 more questions. What if we're still not ready to come out to the field, but we still get the Zoom options?
Yes, so we've looked at that also. So I believe Gavin is the one coach who is not on a Thursday. So what we're going to be doing is having one of our coaches on the Thursday. So that's the one night we do have a coach available. They will be doing a Zoom session. And also on the Saturday, the Zoom session is for the entire club. So you'll be able to get your Zoom sessions if you still don't quite yet want to return to the field. All that we ask is you communicate with us if you don't want to return to the field just quite yet, because we will need to make sure we know who is showing up. And obviously, if it comes down to tracking and tracing through Alameda County, we want to make sure we're accurate with the information that we give them.
All right. Next question. So at this time, will it be mostly individual on-field practice without any interaction with other players, even within a training pod?
Yes, the guidelines currently are to be no scrimmaging. The state actually mandated, I think it was last week, there's to be no competitive sports in competition. That also means at this point, and it comes down to city guidance also, and the guidance we've been received from the city, they do not want any scrimmaging, so they would prefer for everything to be individual as small groups. So at this time, there is not going to be any interaction with other players as far as making challenges. But as shown within the curriculum, it is possible for us to still coach all the different elements and objectives through social distancing by concentrating on cutting off passing channels, which is largely how we coach the players anyway, to be more intelligent, the more aggressive, to trying to go in and trying to win the ball in the 1v1 confrontation, because it's not effective football to begin with. So yeah, we can still coach everything that we need.
Okay. What about air quality issue because of the wildfires? Is this coming Monday safe enough? Is that City of Fremont's decision?
We actually, I say joked, but we actually made a comment in our very first board meeting that by the time we get back on the field, we'll probably be rained out. Turns out smoke got there first. It is something that we are monitoring. Just this week, we had to adjust our Zoom calls to be indoors with player analysis because we know most players are outside doing the Zoom call as well. So it will be our decision as to whether or not we practice. But again, the city also are well within their rights to close facilities. So if they feel that a lower AQI is reason for closing facilities, then they will be letting us know and they will close those facilities. But it is something which we have done in the past is closed because of air quality, and sadly it's happening too often now.
Okay. Last question that I see for the moment. Can we register when it goes to the later phases?
Yes, if you're not comfortable yet returning to the field, it's completely understandable. We appreciate that. There's no need to register this time if you want to wait. Just hold off from registering. Wait until our next phase of reopening. We don't know at this time what that phase will look like. We presented to you before what we have put forward to the city and how we intend to reopen. But again, we're guided by CDC, Alameda County, state level, city. So if they were to say the next phase is full team training and it skipped through how we were going to reopen, then we will be falling in line with the city. In fairness, the city, they have been showing great precaution with reopening. I think we're one of the last clubs to be returning to on-field practices. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing because they're clearly taking our health and safety seriously. So I appreciate that from the city of Fremont. So we will be following their guidelines as to how we reopen.
Okay. No more questions after that.
Okay, excellent. The biggest question we had last night, and there's no debate about it, Bayern or PSG, I think is resounding Bayern. We're hoping the good guy prevails over the oil team. So let's see how that works out for us on Sunday. So hopefully Lewandowski gets 4 or 5 goals. So just to kind of round everything up, again, thank you so much for being on this call. We greatly appreciate your time. We greatly appreciate your support in helping us go through this as well. You may have more questions. That's not a problem. Me and Eric are going to stay on for another 15 to 20 minutes. So if you do have another question, by all means, please send it through and we'll get that answered for you. And again, what we will do with this recording is we will put it onto our website so you'll be able to go back for reference. Just a reminder that if you haven't yet registered, you will need to register to take part. If you leave it too late, and if you register and I'm already on the field, then you're not going to be able to participate that night because we do need enough time to be able to make sure that you're accounted for in the proper training group, communicated to, and that you're aware of all the safety precautions. So please, if you have not yet registered, please can you do so as soon as possible because that greatly helps us with our planning and preparation for hopefully resuming on Monday. And as we do get closer to Monday and the air quality is something we can have a better gauge of, we will let you know as to how we'll be proceeding with those sessions at the start of the week. Fingers crossed everything clears up for us and we can get back on the field. Okay, so guys, thank you so much. We're looking forward to seeing you all when you're on the field next. Okay, thank you. Enjoy your weekend, stay safe, and enjoy the final on Sunday.
Thank you, everyone.